How do you see the Republican fight? Who's the Republican nominee likely to be?
You know, I don't really care. I think they're all losers.
What do you think about that? Outgoing Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid, he's not pulling any punches anymore. He's on his way out of office. He's calling the 2016 Republican contenders, when asked about them, pretty much just a bunch of losers. Former Hewlett-Packard CEO Carly Fiorina, who may be in that group, joins me now with her reaction to that. You know, I mean, it's silly, really. You know, he really didn't articulate what the heck he was talking about. But what do you think about that, Carly?
Well, I actually think it's classic Harry Reid. I mean, this is a guy who has no remorse and no compunction about taking to the Senate floor and lying about Mitt Romney's tax returns. I mean, this guy is all politics all the time. So that's Harry Reid for you.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much all you can say about that. So let's move on to Hillary Clinton, who announced her candidacy this week, and she's been traveling across the country in a van. She's been in Iowa for the past 2 days, and she's starting to talk a little bit about what her candidacy will look like. Here's some of what she said.
Unfortunately, the deck is still stacked in favor of those at the top, and we need to reshuffle the cards. I want to build the economy of tomorrow, not yesterday. And I want to make middle class mean something again. And you cannot do that if you don't have small business really building and driving economic growth.
All right. Quite a few things in there. What's your reaction, and how would you answer what her past has shown about how she would do those things?
Well, of course, Hillary Clinton is right about one thing in that statement. Small business is the engine of economic growth and job creation and innovation in this country. Of course, she doesn't understand the economy, apparently, or she would understand that all of the policies that she backs are the ones that are crushing small businesses. So whether it's Dodd-Frank or Obamacare or just the regulatory thicket and huge, costly, powerful, corrupt government that she favors, those are the things that are crushing small businesses. So during the Obama administration, for the first time in U.S. history, we are now destroying more businesses than we are creating. And specifically, the businesses that are being destroyed are small, family-owned and new businesses, which are the engine of economic growth, which is why the only way to level the playing field, to protect the small instead of enriching the big, is to cut down on government size, scope, cost, complexity, and power.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of business owners out there who would hear you say that and would say amen to that. But I guess the big question for you, if you decide to run, is how would you do that? Because people talk about doing that all the time. And I think that, you know, small businesses feel that the weight of Obamacare and the weight of the regulations that you talk about, they spend so much of their time not running their business, but pushing paperwork and compliance and making sure that they've talked to 14 different agencies before they can do anything. But what do you do to fix that problem? It's so baked in the cake.
Well, you know, I think your question demonstrates the difference between management and leadership. Managers are people who do the best they can within the existing system. And you're right, this system of government we have has gotten bigger and more complicated and more powerful and more corrupt every year for 40 years. Under both Democrats and sadly Republicans as well. Democrats, of course, have made it much, much worse. So the only way you change that system is through leadership, which is when people say, you know what, I'm not going to accept the broken system. It starts by actually understanding how the economy works. But honestly, we have to now hack through the regulatory thicket. Tax reform needs to start with radical simplification of the tax code. We need to repeal a whole set of things just because they've added so much complexity and such a huge burden. And we also have to get this bureaucracy under control. And I think two things that would help tremendously that we can do with the support of American citizens is zero-based budgeting, so we actually know where every dollar is being spent, and pay for performance. For heaven's sakes, you can watch pornography all day long here in Washington, D.C. and get paid exactly the same and earn the same pension and benefit as somebody trying to do a good job. There are a host of things that we need to start doing to unravel this regulatory burden, but we can't just keep managing within the system that's been in place for all these decades. We have to change the system
So start from the bottom and make each one of these agencies be held accountable for $1 and work your way.
Well, that's what a small business has to do.
Exactly, they sure do. I want to talk to you a little bit about foreign policy because, you know, when people look at you as a potential candidate, they say, obviously a lot of experience in business, for many, many years, but not so much on the foreign policy front. And they're concerned because they look at what's going on in the world and they try to picture that presidential person, you know, talking to leaders in other countries and taking on ISIS and all the complexity of what's going on out there. And they wonder how somebody with your experience would be suited to that job.
Well, you know, I've traveled and lived and worked in the world for 25 years. I know more world leaders on the stage today than anyone running, with the possible exception of Hillary Clinton. But unlike Hillary Clinton, I wasn't in photo ops. I was actually sitting across tables from people. I've sat across a table from Vladimir Putin. I know most of the leaders in the Middle East, both the Israeli leaders as well as the Arab leaders. I have been doing business in China for 20 years. I chaired the advisory board at the Central Intelligence Agency. I served on the Defense Business Board for both Rumsfeld and Gates. Foreign policy actually isn't an abstraction to me. Of course, there's always more to learn. But I think I have a pretty good understanding of who our allies are, because I know so many of them, and who our adversaries are, because I've sat across tables from some of them as well. And I think one of the most important things we need to understand is the leverage we actually have. There's so much we could be doing that our allies have asked us to do that we haven't done. So, you know, we could stand up for the Baltic states. We could rebuild our missile defense programs. We could rebuild the Sixth Fleet. We could arm the Ukrainians. We could finally arm the Kurds. We could give King Abdullah of Jordan the bombs and the materiel that he came here begging this country for that he still hasn't received. There's so many things our allies are asking us to do that we haven't done that would be helpful. And we could stop talking to Iran immediately until they submit to full, unfettered access to inspections.
All right. Carly Fiorina, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
You bet.